During the turn of the 21st century, at-home video gaming consoles had already gained rapid traction and continued to grow in popularity. This is thanks to the successes of consoles like the NES, SNES, N64, and PlayStation. On May 12, 1999, Nintendo officially announced a successor for the N64, which was only known under the project's codename, Dolphin. For the better part of a year and a half, no further news of Project Dolphin was seen much anywhere, and fans eagerly waited to see what Nintendo had in store. It wasn't until August of 2000 that Nintendo officially announced the GameCube. This console packed a punch when compared to its predecessor. Higher CPU speed, more RAM, and arguably the greatest controller of all time. Of course, with the GameCube also came its launch title, which was another entry into the Mario series. Luigi's Mansion. Playing as Luigi, you roam a haunted mansion in search of Mario, who mysteriously vanished while waiting for your arrival. This would be the first instance of Mario himself not headlining a launch title for a Nintendo console. With this in mind, there was an immediate impact on sales of the game, as fans met it with skepticism due to a lack of Mario as the main protagonist. However, Luigi's Mansion still holds up as one of the most memorable GameCube titles of all time, ranking 5th on the list of best-selling titles and now more widely recognized as one of Nintendo's most popular series. After the initial release, Luigi's Mansion did prove to be a fun and creative way for Nintendo to show off what their new console was capable of, but aside from an unlockable extra mode and different ranks to achieve, the game lacked much replay value due to its short length and relatively underwhelming storyline. Like many of the classics we've come to know, it didn't take long for a group of passionate players to find ways to bring life back into Luigi's Mansion through the form of speedrunning. I'm JaredsGiantz,
and alongside myself, Glitch Doctor, and our friend HDlax, we'll be covering the world record progression for Luigi's Mansion.
In April of 1998, Nolan Flug, otherwise known as Radix, founded the website Speed Demos Archive as a means to merge two websites that offered downloadable replays of speedruns from the classic first-person shooter game, Quake. In March of 2004, the site became dedicated to speedrunning as a whole, featuring over 1,000 different speed games from thousands of players across the world. Many of the classics were quick to be run and uploaded to the site. David Gibbons, aka Marshmallow, was one of the early speedrun legends, having an impact on numerous games such as Half-Life 2, Banjo-Kazooie, and Super Mario 64. As Marshmallow's interest in speedrunning new games continued to grow, he began targeting more games, and in August of 2005, created the thread titled Luigi's Friggin' Mansion on the Archive's forums. Other forum members were quick to share their knowledge of the game and what could be done to optimize the run. Over the course of just a few short days, Marsh would upload minutes-long sections of the game, which would end on August 27, 2005, when he beat Luigi's Mansion with a 1 hour, 33 minute, and 53 second time. This run would be categorized as any percent, which is a standard amongst most speedruns with one goal in mind, which is beating the game as fast as possible with any percentage of completion and no restrictions. This method of speedrunning sections of a game in separate sessions was common for early speedruns, when most runners weren't sure just how long a game would take in one single segment. Considering this was the first ever run, there were bound to be improvements. For starters, Marshmallow's strategy for vacuuming ghosts was simply moving the control stick all over the place, and he also didn't quite prioritize collecting multiple ghosts at the same time. There were also a number of times throughout the run that he opted to save at Toad, which he would then use to transition into his next segment. The booze that he collected throughout the mansion also had a tendency to leave rooms, and with the booze in the later part of the game having higher health, that ended up dragging out the run much further, as Marsh would sometimes have to go back and forth between multiple rooms just to collect one boo.
Now it should be noted that these boos are important to collect. Unlike the other types of ghosts, once the boos are released from a trapdoor into the mansion, you will be required to collect a minimum of 40 of them to reach the end of the game, on top of a couple other boo-related locked areas.
Marshmallow didn't exactly keep his disinterest for Luigi's Mansion a secret, given that it wasn't what he came to expect from
the next in the Mario series.
Having felt satisfied enough, he would go on to run other games to add to his ever-growing collection of achievements. It wasn't long before other forum members began to gain interest in the game and came up with new ways to speedrun it. Radix, the owner of SDA, had wanted to see someone run through the mansion while collecting all the money needed for an A rank. He would do this himself in a single sitting, setting a time of 1 hour, 36 minutes, and 13 seconds. This would be known as the new 100% category. A notable improvement in this run would come in the form of running on the Hidden Mansion mode. The Hidden Mansion is a new Game Plus mode that is only unlocked after beating the game once on the normal mansion. In the Hidden Mansion, the vacuum is 1.5 times more powerful, allowing for quicker suck-ups on ghosts. Radix would also improve on shooting the moon, or as runners would later coin it, Moonshot, which unfortunately for Marshmallow would take multiple attempts in his segmented run.
After Radix's run, the speedrunning scene for Luigi's Mansion went eerily quiet, and it would stay that way for quite a while. Until 2009. Over in Japan, a runner by the name of Survive would gain interest in speedrunning, having set his sights on LM. Survive would be running the game on the Japanese version, which would actually save him around half a minute due to a shorter character count in the dialogue. He managed to knock down the current standing any percent time with a 1 hour, 33 minute, and 5 second time. This marked the first run for this category to be completed in a single sitting. There'd be plenty more where that came from, as over the course of the next 6 months, he would chip his time down to under an hour and a half, and then under an hour and 20 minutes. On March 5th of 2010, he'd bring the world record all the way down to a 1:13:41. This run was later uploaded to Speed Demo's archive, where it would be seen by many. There was one small issue though. See, up until now, there were varying differences with the timing method for this game. The standard that SDA had applied was timing the run starting from when you first got control of your character, and ending once you've completed the main task and no longer have control. While it's possible the timing method between the SDA runs may be off, the timing standard that Survive used started from console reset. This was common among Japanese speedrunners for years, and it would be applied for the remainder of his submissions. Later that year, and after a fresh name change, Survive, now going by Zavive, would go on to set 2 more world records for the rest of the year, a 1:13:38 on December 21st, and a 1:11:32 just a week later. With this continuous improvement, the new year was looking hopeful for Zavive to set more records. Shockingly enough, this would not be the case, as from here on out, he would stop running the game altogether. But the reason behind this sudden stop would be much more unfortunate. According to a close acquaintance of his who made a blog post about the early days of Luigi's Mansion speedrunning, Zavive would pass away sometime in 2011. It's not been made public what exactly happened, only that his life would end far too soon. And with this, the mansion would once again see another drought in activity as far as world records were concerned. It wouldn't be until 2 years later where that close acquaintance of Zavive's I mentioned would carry on the legacy, using his same username for a brief period to push the game further. On February 7th, the new Zavive, who would later change his name to Xealous, would improve the previous world record by just 1 second. Throughout the month, he would continue to improve, setting 2 more records, ending with a 1:10:20. Both Zavive and Xealous chose to broadcast their attempts on Nico Nico, the live streaming and video sharing site from Japan. This greatly hindered the popularity of these runs, as speedrunners from other parts of the world chose to use more popular English platforms like YouTube. Staying on that topic, as live streaming yourself started to gain more traction, so did news sites designed for just that. The original Justin TV, now known as Twitch TV, would start to become more popular amongst Western countries. During this time, located deep within the freezing recesses of Canada, a young streamer fresh to the world of Twitch would make his debut playing games casually on stream, and inevitably speedrunning. Bonesaw would become one of the more recognizable figures in the world of speedrunning, having ran a number of games and appearing at multiple events from the charity marathon Games Done Quick. In 2012, however, speedrunning would be new ground for Bonesaw, and his first interest would just so happen to be Luigi's Mansion. Bonesaw became aware of the time set by Xealous, and decided to compete for a record time of his own. He became a frequent grinder of Luigi's Mansion, streaming himself to a humble audience on Twitch. And one day during that summer, Bonesaw would finally get his big break, staking his claim to the world record with his 109.53, the first ever sub 110.
Oh! Oh! World record! Yeah! Yeah!
Xealous would quickly learn that Bonesaw had taken the record, and wouldn't take too kindly to this. The very next day, Xealous hit right back with a 108.33. This would be the last time that Japan would hold the world record in this game, as on June 27th, Bonesaw was on yet another run that was looking promising.
So flawless. This is world record. One shot this one. Bullseye. Bonesaw's body is ready. This is it. Do or die. Yes! Yeah! Fuck you! Yes! Yes! I did it! 107.26! Yes! Fuck yeah! Yeah! Oh yeah! Fuck you, God! Fuck you, bastards! Fuck you, King Boo! Fuck you, bastard! Fuck you! Fuck you all! Yeah! Holy!
He couldn't have been happier, having set yet another world record. Like I was saying, having set yet another world record while also lowering it down by another minute. After this, the Canadian runner would continue to crank out times and break multiple minute barriers. Bonesaw achieved a 106.30, a 105.47, and an eventual 104.43. By the end of his 2012 tear, Bonesaw improved the record by almost 3 minutes. He was on top of the world when it came to this game, and to those in the scene back then, it seemed as if no one could stop him. Sure, there could have been some things he could improve upon, but where? The answer would have to wait for just a little while longer.
With the increase in interest for speedrunning around that time, there would be more demand for other interactive ways to run games, not just by oneself, but with other people interested in the same thing. This is when Speedruns Live would be introduced. Speedruns Live, or SRL for short, was dedicated entirely to speedrunning. The homepage displayed streams of popular runners from each and every community. SRL also helped to popularize speedrun races, which consisted of multiple runners beginning a speedrun at the same time to see who could finish the fastest. This would bring more players together, and with that came exponential growth within smaller speedrunning communities, and heavy improvement in many of these games as world records. Luigi's Mansion was no exception to this, as runners began establishing a more organized community that would partake in group conversations, strategy hunting, grinds for personal bests, and races. The LM community immediately became one of the most passionate communities in all of speedrunning, helping to push their game into the top 10 most popular games on SRL at the time. This tightly knit, humble-sized group of runners bonded over their love for the game, and served as the backbone of what Luigi's Mansion speedrunning would later become. Without their passion, none of the community would be where they are today.
Hey, who left this bowl of onions here?
Let's get back on topic. On March 10th, 2013, a runner named HaffABottle1 would complete a run of the any% category in 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 17 seconds. At that time, this would have been considered a world record. However, some suspicion would arise from the community about the runner, and as a result, their times would be removed from all the categories they submitted to. There isn't much remaining evidence as to what happened, but it was speculated that HaffABottle had cheated some of their runs because of their rapid improvement. Despite the claim being relatively baseless outside of this, the community stuck with the ban, which drove HaffABottle, and a potential world record contender at that, away from the game. This leaderboard ban would cover all the categories that they submitted to, including a new category that was found as a collective effort of a few people, which would forever alter the way the categories would be named. By walking behind the chest containing the first boss's key as it spawns in, the player could get stuck against the wall. This small amount of room could be used to clip the player out of bounds, and after finding some new methods to clip past walls, you could beat the game in around 10 minutes. After some time, this much faster run would be labeled any%, with the original any% now being known as any% no out of bounds. Soon enough, more people were actively taking to the any% no out of bounds category again, thanks to the regularly occurring races. According to a tweet from old school any% runner Luke, the 104.17 would be tied, or beaten by just a few milliseconds, by a new runner named VMan3000. VMan would be a part of the tightly knit group that would get together and talk to each other on Skype, partaking in races through speedruns live and grinding attempts with one another. VMan's record would later be sniped by a fellow runner named Rose Fielden, formerly Smashmaster98, who would claim a 104.02 in a call with VMan himself.
It's done! Done! 104.02!
What the fuck?
Around this time, Luigi's Mansion would be hit with a new wave of strategy finds to optimize things that weren't given much thought. It started out with some small time saves, like warping by mirror to get to the mirror room faster, as opposed to walking through the hallway. Over time, this would include more impactful strategies, such as capturing Bogmire in one cycle.
Which, in this context, a cycle refers to the portion of a boss fight where the boss becomes vulnerable, so you can drain as much HP from them as possible before that boss becomes invulnerable once again.
Using any of the game's elements to skip pulling out the flashlight in dark rooms, and even performing tech skips on EGAD's calls. It was one of the first major renaissances the game had ever seen, and that in turn would help push the times even lower. VMan again would get a time just slightly lower than the world record by some milliseconds, but he was merely just getting started. Exactly 1 month after he reclaimed the world record, he lowered his time by over a minute thanks to some better gameplay. There would be no stopping this man, as not even a month later he again topped his time with a 102.17. Even though there was improvement after improvement, a small problem began to arise. Since the game was first run, boos had been quite a hassle to collect. These boos behave much differently than normal ghosts, as you deal damage to them by simply having the vacuum stream on them, rather than pulling HP off of them using one of the sticks. This allows them to move freely, even when dealing damage to them. Boos can also travel between walls, jumping from room to room. In a speedrun, this can very obviously lose time, especially if the room is really out of the way. Boos also cannot be captured in dark rooms, so a boo that escapes into a dark hallway must first be led back to a lit room before being captured. This was the unfortunate truth that had cursed runners for years, and countless PBs were lost to.
No! You son of a... I don't know where he went.
But soon enough, help would arrive.
R-pumping. Arguably the most important strategy ever found in Luigi's Mansion history, R-pumping revolutionized the way speedrunners would collect the unruly boos. In Luigi's Mansion, using the right and left triggers will make the vacuum suck or blow. By holding both triggers down, the game prioritizes the R trigger, which controls the sucking. By quickly letting go and repressing R, you can stop and start vacuuming in an instant. Boos are programmed to stay in place for only 10 HP at a time. Each time the vacuum locks onto the boo, it will stun the boo and reset the 10 HP counter in which it is locked in place. By using this method of R pumping after every 10 HP, the boo will continue to remain in the same spot, making it extremely easy for anyone to capture one. This would first be found in 2012 by a YouTuber named ZanyWitch7. This find would largely fly under the community's radar, and it wouldn't be until the following year that another community member named Coopery would also discover this trick and bring it to light amongst speedrunners. This strategy played a huge role in making boos towards the beginning and middle of the run consistent, but it did not make every boo capturable in one cycle. You see, each time an R pump is performed, the boo being captured will make a cackling noise, meaning that he's been stunned. After the boo has been stunned 15 times, it will quickly escape the room, with no amount of R pumping being able to stop it. Given that you'd optimally take off around 10 HP for every R pump, this leaves you being able to take off an easy 150 HP with not much more room for continuing to vacuum. V-Man stuck to his grind, implementing the new strategy which would heavily aid the consistency of his early game. Boos found later in the run did still remain a problem, however, as some of the boos that were being captured in V-Man's route had upwards of 200 and even 300 HP. Entering the pipe room late into Area 4, V-Man would clear it and check for the breaker room boo, which he let escape earlier in the run because of his high HP. However, he would instead find the pipe room boo, which has a whopping 300 HP. When trying to capture him, the boo would escape and move across the hallway to the breaker room. Even more, the boo in the next room over would leave and go back into the pipe room. V-Man opted to continue the main objective and returned to collect the remaining boos later in the run, when he was forced to pass those rooms. This did, however, still lose him a hefty chunk of time in the long run. Runners also discovered that the new boo strategy would even help for the King Boo boss battle. At this time, the lowest amount of cycles that King Boo had ever been captured in during a run was 3. It was known to be possible to beat him in just 2 cycles from an upload by Clydestorm in 2013. This upload showed gameplay using tools to slow the game down and perfect Luigi's movement, a process otherwise known as tool-assisted speedrunning, or TAS. This means that for a human, 2-cycling King Boo would be a very precise set of movements and vacuum control, not to mention just being lucky enough to carry out the strategy. With R pumping being in play, you could utilize the R pumping strat after vacuuming him normally, which would delay him from hiding back into the Bowser suit. This made 2-cycling King Boo a reality for real-time speedruns, and transformed what was once an extremely unreliable method into something anyone could pick up and learn. Up to this point, the boos that V-Man collected throughout his runs were largely based off of what he felt was best for him, not necessarily what was proven to be fastest. He typically refrained from collecting the armory boo, as the amount of objects in the room on a console would cause lag. Lag can significantly increase the difficulty of R pumping on time, and also runs the risk of a dropped R input. This is not to mention the actual layout of the room, which provides limited space to work with during the suck-up itself. After the new year, V-Man took part in another race, where this time he'd use an older route, collecting Van Gore's 300 HP boo in place of the much weaker hidden room boo. It was generally thought around that time to be faster than going into the hidden room, even though it was found later not to be the case.
What the?
V-Man continued doing attempts, scraping up time save early into his run, and maintaining his lead through Area 2 and into Area 3. He would keep a steady pace going through Area 4, having lost some time from missing a triple catch of the 3 garbage ghosts just before the Van Gore suck-up. V-Man closed out this run, achieving a new record time of 1 hour and 31 seconds. In this moment, Luigi's Mansion was in the midst of yet another renaissance. Multiple minute barriers were once again being broken in an effort to push the game to its absolute limits. At this point, chatter amongst the community broke out. Is a 59-minute time possible? This was the question so many people were asking at the time, and with V-Man pushing to dominate this game with others not far behind, it was looking like that might just be a legitimate possibility. Sure enough, on one fabled night in 2014, V-Man broke the most important minute barrier in Luigi's Mansion history, beating the game in less than 1 hour. With a final time of 59 minutes and 35 seconds, the community rejoiced. One of the most sought after and previously deemed impossible times, now a reality.
You got what you wanted! Let's go!
Video proof of the first 59 has unfortunately been lost to time, but the impact that this run left on the LM community cannot be understated. This was a brand new era filled with young and newly motivated players, and they had no plans of slowing down. And with V-Man at the helm, it truly was an incredible time in history. While there may no longer be video proof of the first 59, there is proof of the next world record, a 59.22. This was a run where things just seemed to fall right into place. Most of the boos were found on the first try, if not very quickly after. A newer and much faster method for the third boss, Boolossus, was implemented from a runner named Sarcry, who at the time was rocking his silver badge in second place. Needless to say, this strat definitely helped cut down on the boss's inconsistency. Rather than just spraying and praying, runners would shoot an ice ball into the swarm of boos, resulting in much more predictable fights. V-Man had also decided to replace Vangore's Behemoth 300 HP boo with the Armory boo, saving even more time on top of that. As the game itself continued getting faster, V-Man's skill was simultaneously improving, and after an entire month of grinding, no new records. A few more months would pass. Nope, still nothing. Despite the obvious improvement, there would be no activity for records throughout the entire rest of that summer. It wouldn't be until late November when V-Man would finally improve the world record by 8 seconds, bringing the record down to 59 minutes and 14 seconds. By the end of 2014, it had already seemed like a new minute barrier was in reach. All we needed now was someone to do it. It was a run like any other, ahead by not even a second on the first split, then the second split. Third split down, and he was still just barely ahead by a second. So where would this run go? Just like that, the run was on. It would take a bit of good luck and a lot of consistent playing to not slip up now. He lost some time trying to get a one cycle on the Breaker Room boo, which required specific luck to get the boo to attack you, so that you can drag him to the other side of the room and finish off with R-pumps. V-Man had lost an additional 10 seconds to collecting the poison mushroom, which had spawned after checking one of the shelves in the cellar. The mushroom causes the player to shrink down in size, unable to interact with any objects. Between both mistakes, it was starting to look tight on time. He'd have to play pretty well and hope that everything falls into place. He had done it. A 58.41. A run that started out not very far ahead of his splits, to having a pretty sizable lead, and for it all to be taken away, just to come back out on top and break another minute barrier? It might seem like a shock to most people, but to the Luigi's Mansion community, it wasn't. V-Man was just that damn good. At this point in time, V-Man had already broken multiple minute barriers, and was even the one to claim the first ever sub hour. But he still wouldn't quite be done with the game, as more strats were being found, which helped him continue setting record times. So at this point, what would his new goal be? With the implementation of 2 faster ball catches on Chauncey, and a new strategy known as poster skip, this new run was looking pretty good. V-Man would even save 10 seconds solely based on RNG by getting the early release cycle on the Whirlindas in the ballroom. But of course, it wasn't all perfect. Late into Area 4, the Pipe Room boo would escape into the hallway and leave towards the Breaker Room. Had this not occurred, this run very likely would have been a 57.
Yes, 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 yes! What the, yes, yes! 5809, yes! Oh god! Yes! Yes!
Despite this, the run was still amazing and V-Man couldn't have been happier with the time.
First run of the day. This category is quite literally over until someone beats it.
But who would beat it? After V-Man's low 58, there wouldn't be much world record competition coming from V-Man or the rest of the community. As V-Man became very busy with personal matters, Luigi's Mansion wouldn't be much of a focus to him. One of his last accomplishments would come from the charity speedrunning marathon Summer Games Done Quick, in which he would participate in the 100% race alongside fellow runners Fire Dragon and Boohead for a crowd of tens of thousands watching at home. In the months following Summer Games Done Quick, discussions would break out in the community which would change the course of Luigi's Mansion history forever.
You see, due to financial issues, V-Man couldn't necessarily afford a Japanese copy of Luigi's Mansion to save the most time. There were, however, other means to run LM. The usage of a USB thumb drive or SD card on modified Wii software to run the game would be met with some scrutiny. Originally, it was thought that using this method saved about a few seconds from load screens, as opposed to the original disc being read through the console. Typically, disk loads would be slower than media played through a flash memory device. This thought would even be echoed by V-Man himself. Though discussion about USB loading times was actually brought up back in 2013 by Bonesaw, which led to a heated argument between himself and V-Man about it, and eventually would be Bonesaw's turning point where he'd step away from the game altogether. It wasn't until the speedrunner Skozzy mentioned that he believed USB loading saved way more than a few seconds that the loads were looked into more closely. From there, people took to the community's Skype group to voice their concerns. Two big voices who argued against USB loading were HDlax and runner I Love Ark, as they'd been adamant about banning it. However, people who had run on USB were mostly against it, as they didn't want to see their times removed from the leaderboards. Some users had even theorized that V-Man knew it was much faster than he'd been letting on, and that he was purposefully keeping that information to himself. For the rest of the year, discussion and arguments would continue. This led to a bunch of drama involving numerous users and even some moderators at the time. The fiasco would ultimately culminate in a ban of any unofficial use of playing the game, effectively erasing many users' times on the leaderboards, as a large number of players had adopted USB loading. So where would this leave us? The world record would be set back to a 59:02, performed by HDlax on January 2nd, 2016, setting the run back by almost a minute. At the time, this was the best run ever performed on a physical disc, but with the game having almost reached a 57, it was time for everyone to pull their weight and get LM back into shape. It would be during this string of world records from HD that the route would slightly change, back to a modified version of something that was once done during V-Man's infancy with the game, getting the boo from the hidden room. It made sense, considering the room wasn't too far out of the way. You could group up all the ghosts in the room to grab them in one go, and finish it off collecting the 40 HP boo, while also being able to skip his following EGAD call. This would skip having to get the pipe room boo, which would save a good amount of time. And instead of attempting the breaker room boo, relying on luck for him to be in a good spot, they would instead collect the boo from Van Gore's room. This would be better, as even though this one has 300 HP, if he left the room, he could only return back to it, making it a reliably easy boo to collect. Some small stuff was added, like getting these two gold ghosts individually in a specific order. Oddly enough, this caused the next set of ghosts to spawn quickly. There was one potential big change to the route the runners had in mind to try and squeeze out some more time save, and this would rely on saving and quitting. Saving and quitting is just how it sounds. You capture a boo, and once EGAD calls you, save the game, reset it, and load your save file. This would save time if you're in one of the far parts of the mansion and need to move across quickly. Instead of making the journey of walking through the mansion, you'll end up loading back in the foyer of the game. That way you'll end up closer to where you need to go. This was not looked upon favorably going back to the Speed Demos archive days, Even though it wasn't exactly banned by their rule set, the majority of the old school runners of the game had gripes with the strategy, whereas newer runners were generally in favor of the time save. In order to make a final decision, it was decided that a poll should be taken. The community would ultimately vote to adopt this strat, saving more time across the board. It was the middle of 2016, and at this point, HD had held the world record for about half a year. He was only 6 seconds away from beating the original 5809 set with the USB loading method. How much longer would we have to wait to see someone smash the record on a disc? The answer might surprise you. Meet Snap32. Snap was a fairly new runner, having seemingly come out of nowhere and had really only ran the game for at least half a year. Over time, he would steadily improve his personal best, which came to a head on June 7th when we'd see a 5804, 5 seconds ahead of the last time submitted by V-Man. A day prior, he had set a new 100% world record, taking the top spot from the category's longtime champion, Fark. With Snap growing to be a formidable foe, it was evident that the 57 was now closer than ever, so why stop here? Snap would improve yet again just 1 week after his first world record with the first ever 57 time, a 57.54. Snap was a runner shrouded in mystery, but whoever he was, he meant business. He'd continued to run other categories alongside any percent no out of bounds, and even among a few other games. 2 months later, Snap would be on yet another run. He'd be on par with his current best time, eventually saving more time due to a new strat found by 2 runners, Michael T00 and Skozzy. What was this new find? At this point, the only save and quit utilized in the run was the save warp out of Weston's room after catching the boo, and considering that save warps were now a legitimate thing for runs, both Michael and Skozzy had theorized capturing a boo, then collecting the fire medallion, and finally save warping from eGad's call about the boo. It turns out that upon loading your newly saved file, you are granted the fire element necessary for some puzzles, meaning you can skip lighting the candles in the mirror room, which unlocks the barbed wire door, as well as a whole mess of eGad dialogue. Not to mention, you're also guaranteed a consistently fast butler cycle in the Area 2 hallway. If you do these sequences fast enough, the butler will always appear at the start of the hallway when you go to light his candles. This find, along with some good boo luck, would help save Snap upwards of 17 seconds by the time he got to the second boss, Bogmire. Holding a sizable lead with small mistakes through the rest of the run, he was able to push his time down to a 57.21. Of course, with a community as active as this, more strategies were bound to be discovered. In early 2017, Michael T00 was doing attempts and performed the Fire Medallion save warp. Upon trying to reset the game using a button combo on the controller, it seemed that the game wasn't responding to his reset request. So naturally, frustration took over and he started hitting random buttons, until the game eventually reset. That was the end of the run, but the next run, something seemed off. Usually when you collect a key to unlock another room in Luigi's mansion, a mini-map in Luigi's trusty Game Boy Horror would appear, showing you what room that key unlocks. Throughout the years, speedrunners would see the screen for a small portion of time until they could quickly cancel out of it and move on. This wasn't happening though. In fact, it seemed that for every key, the minimap was skipped entirely, and you could just walk right along to your next objective.
Hold on, let's look. It's not showing up! I broke the game!
This caught the community by complete surprise, but nevertheless, testing would be done to figure out how this could be performed again. Months would go by, and it was becoming apparent that no one would be able to replicate this, leaving Michael's exploit to be forgotten about. But eventually, Snap found a consistent setup in the training room. By resetting your game during a certain portion of text, and then spamming A and Y to finish the sequence of text before the console resets, it would open the minimap while resetting the game, disabling its function entirely. While skipping one minimap pop-up saves very little time, it adds up over the course of the run, as you have to collect numerous keys to unlock the different rooms throughout the game. The community at large wanted to try runs with this new skip at hand. Snap would continue to do runs, adding more small time saves, like pulling out the first-person view of the Game Boy Horror to skip Luigi's scare animation when a ghost spawns. It was really getting serious now, as even the animation a ghost made when getting sucked up was starting to matter. Luigi's Mansion was reaching new heights, and it was only up from here. A couple of months later, any % no out of bounds would be run at Summer Games Done Quick 2017. This marked the first time the category had ever been run at a Games Done Quick event. The run featured the newly discovered minimap glitch, and was overall a solid performance by HDlax, with him coming less than a minute off of Snap's world record. The run received an overall positive reception and brought a lot of new faces into the game's speedrunning scene. This was a high point for Luigi's Mansion speedrunning, as the game's main category had just been run at the largest speedrunning event ever, and Snap was on the cusp of achieving the first ever sub 57. Snap would be the first person to claim a 56-minute time. There was more time to be saved, as almost 7 months later he would once again lower his record, this time obtaining a 56:36. It seemed that the improvements were never ending. Either that, or people were just getting insanely good. One would have to wonder though, how much more time can be saved? Is there an end in sight? Would anyone ever break another minute barrier? Things would start to slow down, as Snap was becoming busy with his personal life. He wouldn't have much time for Luigi's Mansion. The runners that were still grinding would push themselves harder than they ever have to try and claim the record. Unfortunately, the game was becoming more and more reliant on good luck from boo finds to be able to keep a good run going, resulting in more frustration and a lot more resets. Throughout all the madness, a familiar face would soon return. VMan3000, back at it again, this time with an official disc. He came back to speedrunning LM, proving to everyone that he didn't need USB loading to be considered one of the best. VMan had achieved a 5801, topping his previous PB, but now on official media. Despite how much time USB could save, he managed to demonstrate how he could still fit in with the ever-changing metagame. Even though he had his best intentions, there were still those in the community that had seen him as a negative influence. After some more controversy, VMan decided enough was enough, and to prevent further conflict, he had removed himself from the community largely. He would also stop running the game as a result of both the fallout with a large part of the community, as well as a disk scratch issue which affected his copy of the game. His leaving would come at the expense of losing one of Luigi's Mansion's most talented runners. Over time, the community would gradually move on. More and more people had been working hard to achieve better times and faster strats. Some had wondered if Snap would make a return, while others were following the rising players who could take the speed game further. Throughout 2017, there was one particular runner who seemed very promising. His name was Bluehhhh.
Bluehhhh had been around the community for some time, mostly lurking in the background doing his own attempts. He had started running the game back in early 2016. Inspired by all the new strat finds and world records being set, he would embark on his own speedrunning journey. It was just hard to try and play as best as he possibly could, going up against insane players who dedicated days, weeks, and months into their grinds. Of course it wouldn't be so easy trying to work towards that goal. As a result, there'd be multiple occasions where Bluehhhh would sit down with other like-minded runners who wanted to try and find every possible time save they could theorize, whether large or small. During the process of labbing out potential time saves, he would keep up with his speedruns, inching closer and closer to the top spot. First the sub-hour, then a 58, then a 57, and before you know it, he was just 1 second off of Snap's world record. A number of strategies would be implemented after a bunch of theorizing and testing. You could tell Bluehhhh knew a good deal about the game, as during his runs he would start to drag a boo while capturing one to quickly get over to where he needed to be. This hadn't exactly been seen before, and with that came new potential strategies. A boo that was once thought to only be possible with the absolute best luck was on its way to becoming a reality. By first walking with the breaker room boo towards the left wall, you could then start to pull the boo back towards the right side. Once you've pulled enough, you can walk with him again to end up collecting him in one cycle. This was huge, as you could then replace Van Gore's 300 HP boo with this much faster option. No one had ever dared to go for this trick in a record pace run. But that was enough with theorizing for now. Blue got straight to work. He'd adopt some more small time saves, such as using the tablecloth in the tea room to skip the text from the boo, and even a very tiny time save using a precise scare skip in the parlor during the blackout sequence to go directly towards the door as opposed to going around the table, like most runners had been doing. This mini trick would be named Pythagoras Skip, cause, well, yeah, I have no idea why, but who cares? When it came down to it though, the real time save was in fact getting Breaker Room Boo in one cycle. Bluehhhh was on a run where he would be struggling during the early game, and even going into mid-game, but after some good gameplay and a clean recovery during Boo losses, he was back ahead by 3 seconds. Going into Area 4, he'd have to hope he would get good luck and the one-cycle Breaker Boo. Uncle Grimly, a portrait ghost who was notorious for giving some of the longest wait times for him to be vulnerable to capture, would have to be pretty generous. One quick suck up and it was on to the basement. With the lights turned on and the key collected, it was time to find the boo. Luckily, this boo was hiding in one of the barrels on the top row to the right of the room. If a boo spawns from one of the top barrels, he can easily attack you, at which point you can dodge it and bring him towards the left side of the room. Since he's further towards the right, you can bring down his health a lot more before doing the drags to the right, making it easier to one cycle, as you're left with breathing room for more cackles. Bluehhhh had successfully gotten Breaker Boo in one cycle, the first ever to be done on a record pace run. Bluehhhh also made use of capturing 2 of the toy soldiers at the same time. These can be pretty hard to pull off, as holding on to one of the soldiers for longer periods of time will cause them to break away from you. The fact that these soldiers can also split apart from each other makes it that much harder. Despite the risky situations he was putting himself in, Bluehhhh still managed to persevere. He'd be met with more obstacles, and at this point was fighting for his life. He was well ahead of the record, on pace to get a lower 56. His goal was in sight. All he had to do now was take it. $56.20. Over the course of a few years, Bluehhhh had gone from starting out his journey with this game to helping find and pioneer new ways to play, and ultimately achieving his goal of being the best in the world. To Bluehhhh, this was truly to earn. But even still, he continued to find a drive to grind this game more, with his sights set on a new beast, the 55. At this point, some runners had seen this game as becoming more and more optimal. How much could one person continue to push the boundaries? This is what Blue had likely been asking himself through all this. His 56.20 was completed on January the 20th of 2018, and beyond that, he continued to grind the game for hours at a time, late into the night, hoping for the one good pace that would bring him over the top. Many good runs were seen throughout the months he was pouring into this grind. If you had a hard time going to sleep around this era, you could probably pop on Twitch and watch Bluehhhh on a good pace in the early hours of the morning, only to have it lost to some mistake or just bad luck. June 19th, 2018. Bluehhhh would go live on Twitch, same as always. He would start his grind up, working hard at trying to save as much time as he could. He had a 9:39 segment time out of Boo release, something that was nearly unheard of at the time. The next split later, he saved another 8 seconds, bringing his fire save warp down below 14 minutes. It's hard to describe, but at the time, paces like these were nothing short of phenomenal. You could tell based on the difference in gameplay that Blue was bringing Luigi's Mansion to the next level, adding in more strats and smaller optimizations that hadn't previously been thought about. Finishing Bogmire, he was almost 30 seconds ahead of his 56.20. If some of the Boo hiding spots weren't necessarily considered good luck, Blue would make the best of it, quickly jumping to another possible hiding spot, or, in some cases, using a vacuum to have another furniture piece activate and possibly find the Boo. Exiting the fortune teller Clairvoya's room, he was ahead by 33 seconds. After Boolossus, he'd squeeze out some more time save, and even get a best segment. All of his hard work seemed to be finally paying off, but there was one more gauntlet he'd have to work through. Unfortunately for Blue, the Boo in the breaker room would not be playing nice today. As we've seen before, it's possible that the Boo could go into the pipe room, and if that's the case, he would need to be found, which would require the room to be cleared. The only problem with this is that runners were no longer clearing the pipe room, as the Boo in that room would not be needed, and the puzzle could be completed in the dark. Finding the Boo there would lose a lot of time, especially if the first Boo you found was the slow 300 HP one. The only way he could keep this 55 pace going would be if the Boo went back into the breaker room. Fortunately, he did just that. Since not much time was spent completing the cellar room, the Boo would be back in the breaker room in plain sight. Sadly, Bluehhhh still lost some time, about 12 seconds to be exact. But would all the previous time save be enough to keep it going? It seemed like as much as Bluehhhh was fighting to keep the dream alive, the game would find some way to fight back, making his goal that much harder to achieve. But after everything he had been through, he wasn't going to take this loss lying down.
my god. Woo! Oh my god. We did it! 55! 55, let's go!
A minute barrier that seemed absurdly hard to beat had finally been broken. The collection of the community's finds and broader way of thinking had not only helped bring the time way down, it also helped shape the way the game would be played from here on out. The community had celebrated as another monumental goal had been achieved. Sure, Bluehhh's run did have some time save in Area 4, but would he want to go back for more?
If you say LM is dead, you're stupid. I'm not done.
The rest of 2018 came and went. People were still playing the game, but throughout 2019, there were no new world records set. Bluehhh's would take part in the 2019 LM tournament, but unfortunately there would be no improvement from him. The question now was if Luigi's Mansion was truly dead, and the common thought around the community was that it was. Bluehhh's did remain optimistic and even made a comment regarding it on his leaderboard submission. Nevertheless, runners still kept grinding, and even met up with each other through the Game's Done Quick events. Things were looking good, and then the unthinkable happened.
The breaking news, stay at home as the coronavirus pandemic spreads.
The list of closings and activities being suspended is growing from coast to coast.
Major cities across the country are looking more like ghost towns.
Businesses across the country forced to shut their doors, already leading to absolutely stunning impact.
A good majority of the world was essentially locked down. If you were around during this time, you would know there wasn't much to do. Most events were closed or went completely online. For gamers, this meant that there weren't really any plans to make outside, which gave ample time to pick up speedrunning. Some new runners joined the fray from all over the world, and it was one person far, far away who would be pushing his limits every day to make himself known.
Dude! Oh my dude. This is going in the newspaper tomorrow. I need like a task with losses. Oh yeah, I just got a task with losses. Oh my dude, this is big. Apparently Chauncey sleeps on the floor now.
PabloRuns had actually started his journey in 2019. After watching the Luigi's Mansion masterclass that Bluehhh's put on, Pablo became motivated to pick up Luigi's Mansion himself. Being from the Netherlands, he owned the PAL version of Luigi's Mansion, so competition in the main any % no out of bounds category wouldn't work out. The reason for this is because the PAL and NTSC versions are completely different. In PAL Hidden Mansion, the entire mansion is mirrored, ghost patterns are different, and a lot more difficult. And you take double the damage that you would if you were playing on the Japanese version. Because of this, the world record for PAL is several minutes slower than NTSC. With that in mind, Pablo would start off doing runs of the harder PAL Hidden Mansion, but would eventually acquire a Japanese copy of the game. At this point, Pablo would practice for several hours a day, multiple days in a row. He'd completely absorb himself in the game to try and practice everything that he could. Just like Bluehhh's and everyone that came before him, he'd want to prove that he could keep up with the constantly evolving run. Pablo would grind his time down to a 57:17 in late December of 2019. This kind of improvement is almost unheard of, considering he had only started his LM journey just 3 months prior. One could theorize that the harder PAL Hidden Mansion had hardened him in a way, and that switching to the Japanese version would prove to be somewhat of a walk in the park just by comparison. They would be right, but he wouldn't just stop at any % no out of bounds. He'd cover a wide variety of categories on both NTSC and PAL. Going into 2020, he would work his time down to a 57:10, and just one day later, he would tie Snap's last submitted time. At this point, the community started to take notice. It was practically impossible to ignore Pablo's rapid increase in skill, and his even more insane improvements in time. For a player who was new, he was extremely good at the game. All the strats that Bluehhh's had been doing, Pablo was doing as well, and throughout 2020, he would continue to push his times lower, inching ever closer to a 55. All it would take was one last good push. Pablo had been saving a lot of time over his low 56, with 55 very well being a possibility. He was losing minimal amounts of time, but it seemed like he was in pretty good shape. Despite having completed Boo losses in one cycle, Pablo would lose a lot of time as the remaining Boo left would give him some trouble. It was an unfortunate circumstance, as at this point he was just barely ahead. He had lost a lot of time, but a good Area 4 could make up for it.
Oh, dude.
By some miracle, he was bringing it back. Even though the gold splits here weren't accurate due to some changes he made, he was still back ahead. Was it enough? After 2 years of no new records, Pablo finally improved the world record by 1 second.
Yes! Yes! Yes, I did it! I did it! I got it! I did it! Oh, I did it!
No matter how big or small this world record was, it proved that Luigi's Mansion was not dead. This was a triumphant victory for Pablo and the community. But surely there was time left to save, especially considering the Boo losses. After this new world record, Pablo decided it was best for him to take a break from Luigi's Mansion. Nah, I'm just kidding. He did decide to move on to the other main categories to try and improve his times in those. At this point, the goal that he had in mind was a full world record sweep of the 5 main categories. So in some aspect, he did take a break from No Out of Bounds, which would give other runners a chance to catch up. With there now being 255 times, some runners had wanted to see if they could be the one to come out on top next. Joven, a runner that had been playing since 2017, was one of the players who looked to be up on the rise. He'd continue to get paces that would make him look like a contender for world record. In November of 2020, Joven would be on a run that looked like he could throw Pablo off his game. Unfortunately, while he would get a 55, Joven would just be mere frames off of Pablo's time. But this run was close enough to world record to make Joven want to continue grinding. While all of this was going on, another older runner had quietly come back, making his appearance for the first time in over 2 years. And this time, he would be armed with a new strategy that would once again change the game. It was now possible to complete King Boo in only 1 cycle.
Yeah! Oh my gosh! It's been done!
The community had been active with grinds of their own, as well as strategy testing. Around this era, it wasn't uncommon to see runners in the LM Discord server grind out potential strat ideas and finding glitches. They would goof around and have a bit of fun when they weren't brainstorming ideas. One idea was suggested from the Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon runner Vicious, daring LM runner RedsMSR to beat King Boo with his feet. This of course would be ridiculously hard to pull off, meaning failure was more likely. However, in a bizarre turn of events, Red would accidentally shoot one of the spike balls early, popping Bowser's head off prematurely. With this in mind, the community got to work to see if they could somehow keep Bowser's head off for longer by repeating the shot early. Actually, it was already known to be possible that you could one-cycle King Boo on the 3DS remake of Luigi's Mansion. Now the 3DS version is quite different from its GameCube predecessor in terms of its technical inner workings, but considering the two were alike, with some strats being possible in both versions, why wouldn't it be possible to do the same here? This idea would be a collective effort between Red, Saria100, and Crazy8 the Ace, amongst other members of the community, but it would finally be worked out and performed live by Saria in the Luigi's Mansion Discord server.
Yeah! Oh my god!
Yes! It's been done! Surreal.
This would be an insane find, and what made it even better was having members of the community, new and old, together in one spot to witness something that wouldn't have even been thought about had it not been for a silly suggestion. This new find would save 20 seconds off of the run, which would have already brought Pablo's record down to a 55:37. Between that and some of the time lost from King Boo, who's to say the world record couldn't be brought down by another minute? Once again, it was time to get to work. But who was this older runner who was making his first appearance after being inactive for a few years? The man of mystery himself, Snap32. With this new King Boo one-cycle strat now possible, Snap pushed forward to see what he could do. This new trick would be rather inconsistent, and would make it that much harder for runners to go for, especially being at the end of the run. After a few weeks of testing, Snap had found a way to boost its consistency, but the trick would remain a daunting obstacle. He wasn't exactly comfortable pulling this off in a run, instead opting to go for the insta-shots that saved an ounce of time, which were found alongside King Boo 1-cycle. This meant he could still go for a normal 2-cycle. Unfortunately for Snap, some of his streaming equipment would be stolen, but he replaced what he could, aimed a webcam towards the TV, and started up a run. He was trailing a bit behind Pablo, but there would be room for improvement. It would start to show when he got near the end of Area 3. He was ahead by 14 seconds out of Bulasis. At this point, he changed the times he was comparing against to his best ever segments. This was his attempt at not trying to worry about his pace and to just play. After all, being behind by almost a minute wouldn't make anyone nervous. To keep up with the times, Snap had to adopt the drag strat for the Break Room Boo 1-cycle, which he managed to perform flawlessly. There was still more to do, so he tried getting a double on the toy soldiers. He wasn't quite able to get this, but in the back of his mind, he knew there was still time to save for the final boss, so he kept pushing on. The rest of the area went pretty well. When it came time to start King Boo, he was already on track to get a 55:52. The nerves had built up as he hadn't held the world record for a couple years. It took him everything he had, but after a couple quick ones, he managed to do this.
Holy oh. It's been 2 years since I've had this record. It's done, man. 55:49.
Snap was more than happy to finally be back at it again. Hopefully he'd hang around to try a run with the 1-cycle King Boo. Though this wouldn't actually happen, as he'd once again no longer have time to continue doing attempts. It was up to the rest of the community to try and make that happen. In fact, another longtime runner who was keeping himself up to date with all the new strats would shock the community, as he too had held the world record 5 years prior. You may be able to recognize him.
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
Holy f***ing shit, dude! Dude, turn the f***ing webcam on, bro! He just f***ing got it!
I don't even care! Oh my god!
HDlax had been doing some runs of the category here and there, but this time he was back, and with a new record time of 55:46. He had played this live while JaredsGiantz was over to visit. Jared had previously been busy doing attempts on HD setup, and after having the urge to play, HD wanted to try one attempt. Neither had imagined this run would turn out the way it did. The two were both ecstatic over watching this one-off run turn into something great. This would also be the first record set with the new King Boo 1-cycle strategy. But actually, hold on a second. Now it should be mentioned that while all these records were being set, a majority of the attempts these runners would put in wouldn't end up finishing. This has to do with the process of searching for boos. The faster the times got, the more necessary it had become to find boos on the first try. See, these boos will be hidden in objects throughout the rooms. Your trusty Game Boy Horror boo radar will let you know if you're getting close to an object that has a boo, or a decoy. In every room, the radar flashing red near an object would give you a 50-50 chance of that object actually containing the boo. This is not to mention that certain rooms would be physically bigger and may have a lot more boo hiding spots, so these boo hunts could become much bigger time sinks than you'd want. That makes runs like HD's one of a kind, being able to pull off times like that on the very first attempt of the day. With that in mind, the times were starting to get ridiculously low. But how much lower was it going to go? Still on the grind was Joven, and 4 days after HD's run, Joven would go on to snipe the record with a 55:43. The run wasn't without its problems, and determined to get a better time, he'd achieve a 55:39 just 1 week later. He had opted to go for the insta-shots for 2-cycle King Boo in his 55:43, so as to not jeopardize the run where he was already ahead by some time. However, the following run wouldn't be as lucky, meaning he had to chance the 1-cycle, which luckily for him paid off.
Dude, did I just get record again? Oh my god! Let's go! Let's go!
Things were really heating up. Pablo, after seeing all the new improvements, wanted to reclaim his spot at the top once again. He would get pretty close, finishing a run with a time of 55:45. This would have been the record if he had gotten it just 8 days earlier. But that didn't matter now. Wanting to save as much time as he could, Pablo would implement a couple new strategies involving collecting numerous ghosts at the same time, one of which was found by him. These new finds, along with some better gameplay and good luck, would land him 20 seconds ahead of his splits. Area 4 would not be so kind, as he'd lose over half that time going into the final fight. It was gonna take a 1-cycle King Boo to get him the record.
Let's go! Finally! I did it! 1 year, I did it! I got the record again! Finally! Oh, I probably woke up everyone. I don't care a single bit.
Don't make me come down there, you punk!
Amidst all the excitement from this battle for the world record, a small new find would shock the community. Laser Crusader, a user who would spend time modding Luigi's Mansion, had found an odd anomaly that had been overlooked by the developers. In Chauncey's room, you'd need to activate the rocking horse to get Chauncey to wake up, after which you could use the ball in his room to attack him. This will bring you to the boss stage where you would need to fight him. While Chauncey wakes up, the game forces Luigi to stand still, so you could forget trying to hit him with the ball early. Or could you? See, what Laser Crusader found is that this invisible cutscene trigger, which would cause Luigi to freeze in place, doesn't cover the entire room. If you were to stand in a small spot to the left of the crib and activate the rocking horse, you could still move around until you walk into the cutscene trigger once more. By luring the ball over while in this free roam state, you can in fact hit Chauncey early, skipping the wait of having to watch his animation while he wakes up on top of another text box. The find would only save a few seconds, but in a game nearing total optimization, it would be enough to give runners a push to keep going.
Yes! Yes! I would show more of a reaction, but honestly, I'm just finally glad I got it. Record is back to the US of A.
But how long would the record stand in the US of A? Reminiscent of the Blue Hits era, Pablo would want to add anything and everything he could to save time. A trick that was normally used only if the run wasn't on great pace was used at all times now by a few top runners, collecting a boo double from both the ballroom and the neighboring storage room. This was a potentially problematic strat that had been known about since 2016, as another effort from Michael T00 and Skozzy. In order for this trick to work, you would have to hope that the boo in the ballroom is in the right set of chairs. This way, when you go to the next room, that boo will stand in place for some time. If he were in any other object, The time loss that would come from having to search these other objects would mitigate the time saved, and there wouldn't be enough time during his spawn for you to leave. Thus, the Boo would fly around and eventually leave the room. After spawning him from the right set of chairs, you would have to quickly find the Boo in the storage room and try to manipulate him into going down to the ballroom. Once he pops through the wall, you can go back to the ballroom, where they should be in the same spot together, making for an easy suck-up. This would also skip one of the EGAD calls, saving even more time on top of that. This would prove to be a risky trick, as if any of the steps went wrong, then the setup for the trick would be broken, causing more time loss than it's worth. If Pablo wanted to really pioneer the metagame even more, he'd have to implement anything he could. This could involve a strat mainly suitable for a TAS. For brief context, a TAS, or as mentioned earlier in this documentary, a tool-assisted speedrun, is a run performed on an emulator in which a user can slow the game down frame by frame and insert whatever controller inputs they want at any specific time they want to. This can lead to a theorized perfect run. With this, you would typically see strategies not usually capable by humans. In March of 2016, the first any % no out of bounds TAS was created by Tas Malio, a Paper Mario tasser who was brand new to the world of Luigi's Mansion. He would have help from runners around that time to try and figure out what would be the optimal strategies to do. One of these strats would later be coined Swag Balls. Despite it sounding like something you'd see out of the early 2010s internet, Swag Balls was a very quick trick where instead of tracking down yarn balls that would roll on the floor that would be used to attack the portrait ghost Nana, Tas Malio would simply hold his vacuum out and the balls would just instantly shoot straight out of the vacuum. It's one of those tricks where if you blink, you'll miss it. Pablo and Saria100 would wonder if this was possible to do in real time. Pablo even made a video which explains the situation in more detail. But nevertheless, they managed to replicate it, which would then be added into Pablo's runs. With this in mind, it was time for him to get to work. With all the new luck-based and more precise strategies added into the run, it would drastically increase the difficulty, on top of the added pressure of having to do all these things in one good run. Luigi's Mansion, what once was a speedrun with simpler and more consistent methods, was now becoming a monster gauntlet of precise tricks and luck-based gameplay. Pablo had been on lots of good paces, but that wouldn't make the grind any less frustrating. In May of 2022, he would be on a run where his time save would fluctuate, but eventually paid off in the end as he was over 30 seconds ahead leaving Van Gore, with only one more thing to do. If he were to get this one cycle, he could achieve a 55.05, a time just 6 seconds off of a 54, a minute barrier that was once thought to be impossible. He would have to hope the fight went well. Sadly for Pablo, King Boo had gotten in his way when trying to make the second ball shot towards Bowser's head, causing it to blow up prematurely. With this, he had to take a backup 2 cycle, which would leave him with a 55.25. It was close, but after everything, he knew that 54 was right around the corner. He spent the rest of the summer grinding hard for a shot at an insane run. Many paces would come and go. The viewers had eagerly been keeping up with his streams to see if he could pull it off. In August, Pablo had a run that really wasn't great, but in the end could PB with a 1 cycle. After an even quicker setup known as a TAS 1 cycle, he managed to pull off a 5-second PB. He had still yearned for the next minute barrier break, which would motivate him to keep going. And just 4 days later, he was on another run. After saving only seconds throughout most of the run, he would go on to save 16 seconds on Boolossus, and then another 3 seconds after that. With this, he had a best possible time of 54.48. He had to go all out for this one. What was weird though was how he seemingly dropped a single toy soldier. Normally you would drop it during a double after not giving one of them enough attention, but it could be that he was holding on to the green one for just a bit too long. Either way, this killed off a lot of his time save. Still, he pulled through with a 55.13. The times were getting even closer to the elusive 54, but it seemed like something was preventing it from happening. Still, runners pushed on. Joven had been trying to keep up with everything that Pablo had been doing. There were a couple tricks that Joven wouldn't do, but regardless, he was still able to get good paces. He was on a run that would be a high 54 pace going into Area 4, but throughout the area he'd lose time, ultimately leading to a 55.07. The run was now just 8 seconds away from obtaining the 54. But who would be the one to get it?
As the summer of 2022 was nearing the end, the competition was growing stronger, as soon some runners would have to go back to school, including Pablo. But with the 54 being within reach, he would have to push himself harder than ever now to get it in time. He would soon be on a run where he'd slowly save more time throughout his splits. 54 was looking promising, but it wasn't until he went to Toy Soldiers where he would get the chance to save a bunch of time that he previously lost. It seemed that if he were to get 54, it was gonna be close. One basement section and some smaller time losses later, it was still possible that he could obtain at best a 54.56. All he had to do was play perfectly.
Sad. Okay.
Once again, because King Boo was in the way, it made the second bomb shot impossible, as it would explode upon impact of King Boo's hitbox. This would mark the first time anyone had ever been on 54 pace going into the final boss. He was more determined than ever now to go for the minute barrier break. However, after he consistently streamed for days before he'd have to go back to school, he would not see another 54 pace that late into the game. Pablo would walk away with a 55.09, just 2 seconds off the world record. He had unfortunately ran out of time, and would be forced to temporarily stop streaming, as his studies would take up most of his time. The speedrunning scene for Luigi's Mansion was at a weird standstill at this point, as the only other record contender would do some runs, but not too many, and he wasn't actively seeking out a 54. Some had wondered how long it would be before Pablo would come back. He wasn't trying to grind out runs all day and all night, but he definitely put in some attempts to achieve his goal. And just like that, he was on another 54 pace. With this run, he would improve some of his best segment times. In what was almost deja vu, as long as he kept it together, there's a chance he could wind up with a 2-second improvement from that last attempt. Are you f***ing kidding me? Again? While it seemed as though Pablo was more than capable of getting the time, there was always something that would stop him. First, King Boo gets in the way, twice, then he undershoots the second bomb. To be fair, this was mostly uncharted territory, and just like blue hits, there'd be many good paces that would die to some unforeseen circumstance, whether it be based on nervousness or a troll from the game itself. Much like the first time, Pablo would soon find himself at the end of his school break, and would once again have to prioritize his life over the speedrun. This last encounter with a run like that would start to bug him, leaving him thinking about how he could still find some time to do runs during this busy time of the year. So on occasion, Pablo would stream attempts for about 3 to 5 hours when he did find some free time. They wouldn't come often, but when they did, it would be very exciting to watch and see if he could do it. So in the end, the question became, could he do it?
It's over! It's over! It's over! It's over! It's over! I cannot believe this! I cannot believe it! I actually got it! This feels unreal, man. This doesn't feel real.
At long last, it had finally been done. A 54-52. And what a run it was. Segment times that before had been unthinkable were now performed on console, which would culminate in the first minute barrier break the category had seen in the last 4 years. Could the run go lower? Of course. This 54 wouldn't be without some small mistakes, including having to get an extremely clutch backup after missing the toy soldier double, and even forgetting the save warp after Armory Boo. In fact, this run itself would have been in the 5440s without those mistakes. But as of today, this is where the current world... hold on. Funny Chauncey gets up down in the early 40s, and Luigi suck up. Wait, what? Oh my god, I got it! Oh my god! Oh my god! Dude! Did you watch Cycle? I did!
A new find shocked the entire community. This was something that had been talked about for years, but unfortunately was stopped at every turn because no matter what anyone did, it simply did not seem to be a possibility. That is, until a longtime friend of the Glitch Doctor, a guy who didn't even speedrun the game, messaged him with an anomaly that up to this point had never been documented. The two would get into a call, and eventually through Pike's guidance, the Chauncey 1 cycle was performed live in front of other members of the community. If you want to hear more about the in-depth detail involving its findings, you can check out this video, which will be linked in the description. Naturally, this prompted other runners to try the trick out themselves. Within just a short time, loads of people were getting it. What was the secret? A frame-perfect R-pump, kinda like you would do with a Boo. However, it would not involve holding down the left trigger. It's thought that the very quick R-pump around the time that Chauncey breaks off can interrupt him actually breaking off. This now meant that every boss, and hell, even every portrait ghost for that matter, could now be one-cycled. But how much time did this new strategy save? Over half a minute. This was the single biggest time save to be found for this game, if you're not counting the out of bounds discovery, and it helped that it was also so early in the run too, compared to the King Boo 1 cycle. After some attempts, loads of people were getting it at least once, making it a more welcoming strat to perform for runners of all skill types. This was truly the beginning of a new era. That same night it was found, the record for Chauncey key was nabbed up. Twice. And a record for any percent would be set not too long after. So this meant that no out of bounds wasn't too far behind, right? At this point, no one was really grinding for a world record in this category. Some had done runs to at least try to take advantage of the new time save, but weirdly enough, it seemed like almost everyone that was going for a serious time would end up choking the runs that they were ahead on. This resulted in somewhat of a death of the category yet again. You would think someone would want to seize the opportunity to come out on top, especially in the first category you see when you open the leaderboards. This just wasn't the case. Pablo was mostly just concerned with 100%, and Joven didn't really have any interest in doing no out of bounds. Snap really wasn't active in the community at all. You know, aside from that one post he made about 100%. Then another one, and another, and another. Snap had come back and beaten Pablo once again, this time by 3 seconds. Before Chauncey 1 cycle, almost anyone you asked would have probably told you that Pablo's record wouldn't have been beaten, or at least not for a long time. But it was here, plain as day. So how did this run play out? There weren't really any major mistakes as far as time loss goes. Some of the boos were in bad spots, and Uncle Grimly took a few seconds to show his heart, and maybe some small time losses came from equally sized chokes spread out throughout the run. Aside from that, this run showcased a successful Chauncey 1 cycle, got the tech skips in laundry room and kitchen, did the fastest projection save warp you could get, Breaker Boo 1 cycle, an insane toy soldier double, and after all that, a 51-55 Van Gore split. Snap then closed this run out with, of course, a King Boo 1 cycle. In fact, this wasn't his only PB that day. Just 10 hours prior, he went from his old 55.49 PB to a 55.17. So, in the span of just 11 hours, he managed to PB by over a minute, and ultimately edged himself in history as being the first runner to improve the any percent no out of bounds world record using the Chauncey 1 cycle.
But even though he wouldn't have many mistakes throughout the run, the small ones that he did have would add up. It is a very good run, though the time loss, in addition to Snap's use of some easier strats, wouldn't keep others from taking his spot for long. Joven was creeping up on him, and he'd have some good runs with Chauncey 1 cycle under his belt. During one of his sessions, he'd have 3 record paces to Area 4, with one of them getting to King Boo, though all of them would be a bust. Almost 4 months after Snap's run, Joven would see another good pace. There was still some time loss, including this funny banana gag, but combined with some newer faster strats, he'd clutch out first place by 6 seconds. 54, a minute barrier that would have been inconceivable in years past, had just welcomed its third runner. As with the different eras of the speedrunning scene, the faster the top time got, the harder the competition would become. You'd have to pray to get insanely lucky for even a chance at a time like this. Unless you're Pablo. While saving seconds upon seconds, Pablo would perform a very good run. He'd have an insane nana room with the swag ball strat, he'd use the more optimal ghost grouping methods, and then of course with the good comes the bad. Some lackluster boo hiding locations, a rather large mishap in Safari Room, a 5-second Grimly, and some other minor mistakes. And even with that, he'd still be well within record pace.
I'm literally on pace to record with a 2 cycle. Yes! Oh, dude, what a good run. I'm speechless, man. I'm speechless. What is this run?
Throughout all the years that players have speedrun this game, there'd always be one run that people thought was untouchable. Then someone comes along and proves them wrong. That too goes for Pablo's run of 54.20. Sort of. If he hadn't made any mistakes throughout the run, and everything went smoothly, he may have very well had a 53. Regardless, this 54.20 has proven to be one of the most legendary runs of the mansion, and I'm unsure whether this run would even be beaten for a long time.
I had a feeling I was gonna get a 54.20. I don't know why. This is like a time that basically matches my OPB in terms of quality. This is not my final PB, by the way. I am gonna go for the 53 one day because this run proves it's possible. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it someday. Someday.
Alright, let's go. Feels good. Record back in the US of A.
It's funny, I honestly thought that Pablo's run was going to be the perfect ending for this video. Then Joven comes back out of nowhere and gets this 54-12. And honestly, this run was actually pretty smooth. There were a few unfavorable things that slowed Joven down, like the boo double being a little slow due to the storage room boo being a bit uncooperative. He didn't do swag balls, he wasn't able to get the fastest projection save warp strategy, Bulasis' ice element from the right side statue would go out of bounds, which forced Joven to do a backup strat with the ice from the other statue. Oh, and how about a quarter of the required boos being found second try? When I mention everything like this, yeah, the run sounds kinda bad. But on the other hand, so much during the run went right. And if anything, this further proves that a 53-minute time is in fact possible. I honestly can't believe it's gone down this much. But finally, and this better be it this time. This is where the current world record stands as of this video. From a 133.53 in August of 2005 to a 54.12 in January of 2025, this run has seen an impressive amount of large and surprising changes, and along the way we have witnessed many talented players show off their skill. As of this recording, there are over 700 runners for the any % no out of bounds category on the leaderboards. You can find the leaderboards at speedrun.com/LM, which also has guides on how to run the game depending on what category you want to do. So what's in the cards for the future of Luigi's Mansion? Who knows? There is still time to save off the current world record, and new strategies are actively being discussed and found to this day. Perhaps we could see another Taz strat implemented and made possible to be done in real time? Could we see an older runner come back and take the spot, or welcome someone new? Only time will tell. But with that being said, we would like to thank everyone for watching this documentary about our community. We hope you enjoyed watching. If you are interested in seeing more documentaries of some of the other categories, or even other games that I, Glitch Doctor, have had a hand in, leave a comment down below. Don't forget to check out the runners mentioned, some of whom are currently active today. The links to their Twitch streams will be in the description below. If you would like more interesting stuff to watch, I compiled an hour-long video of many of the glitches within Luigi's Mansion. We would also recommend our friends over at the SPM Community channel for their world record progression of Super Paper Mario speedrunning. Until next time, take care and peace.
Yes, I did it!